I don't know when I started watching the late night channel. Channel 77 just ... appeared one night. I swear it wasn't in the channel listings before, but when you're flipping through TV channels at 3 a.m., because you can't sleep, you don't ask questions. It was simple at first. Static, some faint buzzing like an old radio struggling for a signal. I stopped because the static wasn't entirely random. There were flashes and shapes like the screen was trying to form an image. And then it suddenly did. A tall man appeared sitting in a dim room. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with tired eyes and a face that looked like he hadn't smiled in years. He stared directly into the camera. It wasn't the casual gaze of a news anchor or a host. It was unnerving, like he was looking at me. He didn't speak. Not at first. The audio was just that same low buzzing. A rhythm that matched the thud of my pulse. I could feel it. I don't know how long I watched. By the time the screen cut to black, I realized I'd been leaning forward so close my forehead was almost touching the glass. The next night I couldn't help myself. I stayed up waiting for it to come on again, but it never did. By the end of the week, the channel was the only thing I could think about. My phone was dead, literally and metaphorically. I hadn't touched it in days, missed calls, emails, and texts, but it didn't matter. I stayed glued to the TV, watching for hours even when the screen was black. I flipped channels for hours, restless, until finally at exactly 2:14 a.m., Channel 77 buzzed to life. It was the same man, same room, same stare. But something was different this time. In the background, faint and barely visible, was movement, a flicker of shadows just behind him. The man's lips twitched like he was about to say something. I leaned closer. The man spoke for the first time that Friday. It wasn't a sentence, not really. Just my name, Elliot. I jumped so hard that I banged my head on the TV stand. My name echoed through the room, soft and calm and impossibly clear. I sat there in the dark, the hum of the TV filling the room, my heart pounding like I'd just woken up from a nightmare I couldn't remember. I stopped leaving the apartment after that. I told myself it was because I was tired, but I knew the truth. The world outside didn't feel real anymore. The only thing that felt real was the broadcast. The man started talking more. Not sentences, just words, fragments, home, together, now. It made my skin crawl, like hearing a stranger hum your favorite song. I tried to stop watching. Really, I did. I smashed the remote, unplugged the TV, and even threw a blanket over it. But at 2:14 a.m., the screen would flicker to life, buzzing softly like a mosquito in my ear. And I couldn't help myself. I told myself it was just a coincidence, a dream, sleep deprivation. But then I saw the others. It happened when I peeked out the window one night, desperate for some proof I wasn't losing my mind. The street was empty, but through the windows of the apartments across from mine, I saw them, people sitting on their couches, staring at their TVs, every single one of them. Their faces were pale, their bodies still, their eyes wide and empty, and their faces were just a few inches from the screen, as if they were glued to the TV. The entire village was watching. I walked outside the next morning, desperate to talk to someone. They all say they fall asleep watching the TV. None of them seem to remember anything spooky. It all seemed to be in my head, but then I saw them that night. The villagers were leaving their homes one by one, moving like sleepwalkers. Men, women, and children all were walking toward the edge of town. None of them looked at me. Their faces were blank, their eyes glassy, and their movements unnervingly synchronized. They gathered in the town square, standing in perfect rows. Yes, the man from the broadcast was there too, standing by the antenna. He wasn't on a screen anymore. He was real, flesh and blood, but just as eerie in person. He raised his arms, and the crowd fell to their knees in unison. I hid behind a parked car, my heart hammering. "Soon," the man said, his voice carrying unnaturally through the square. "Soon the signal will be strong enough." And when it is, we will connect. All of us. Then he started emitting a low hum that made my teeth vibrate. The villagers began to sway, their movements eerily synchronized, mouths whispering words I couldn't hear. My skin prickled as a strange warmth filled the air, and I swore I could feel their whispers in my own head, like fragments of a half-remembered dream. Then I understood. I never had problems sleeping, and it's all connected. We were all sharing a collective dream, a web of thought and feeling that pulsed through the air like electricity. The man's voice rose above the hum. In dreams we are one. We can all live here, he said, together. No more loneliness, no more pain. And for a moment I felt it. The connection, the weightlessness, the utter joy of belonging to something greater. But then I woke up cold and alone in my bed. The silence pressed down on me like a lead blanket, and for the first time I wished I hadn't woken at all. I started noticing others like me, people who were beginning to piece it together. They moved through the town with the same haunted look I had when I started noticing the dreams. We decided to turn off all television as soon as the sun was down and the dreams stopped appearing. But still the man's words echo in my mind. Soon the barriers will fall. And I realized with a chill that he might be right. There was something. I first heard the signal on a night when I couldn't sleep. Static filled the radio as I turned the dial aimlessly, chasing after something, anything to help me fall asleep. My apartment was quiet, just the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards. The radio static softened as I found an odd gap between the two stations. At first I thought it was just noise, but then the voice came through, faint and crackling. Anna. I froze. My throat tightened as the voice repeated, clearer this time. Anna, it's me. It's Dad. My chest heaved as if the air had been knocked out of me. Dad had been dead for 3 years. Dad? I whispered, feeling absurd for speaking to the radio. I miss you, honey. I need your help. For a moment I was too stunned to respond. This was impossible. A cruel prank, maybe, or my overworked brain playing tricks on me. The voice came again, gentle, familiar. There's something I need you to do, Anna. Just one thing. What? I asked, my voice shaking. Take a flower to my grave, a sunflower. Tomorrow before noon. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to yell at the absurdity of it all. But the voice was so calm, so certain, that I felt my resistance fading. I couldn't ignore it. Not when it sounded so much like him. The next morning I found myself at the cemetery, sunflower in hand. Dad's grave was unassuming, the edges of the stones slightly weathered. I placed the flower down, feeling foolish but also strangely at peace. I told myself it was just closure, something I'd needed to do for years. But as I walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. By the end of the week, the frequency was all I could think about. I tuned in every night, half hoping and half dreading to hear the voice again. And I wasn't the only one. News had started to spread. People claimed they were hearing the voices of their own loved ones. Parents, siblings, children, people who were gone. Each story was unique, but the pattern was unmistakable. The requests were small at first. One man said he was told to apologize to a friend he hadn't spoken to in years. Another woman said the voice of her late husband asked her to avoid driving down a certain street for a day. But then the tasks started to change. Anna, it's me again, the voice again said one night. I was curled up on the couch, the radio balanced precariously on the edge of the coffee table. Dad? I need you to quit your job, he said, his tone as calm and familiar as ever. What? I asked, sitting up straight. You don't belong there. It's not safe. You need to leave. My job wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Leaving wasn't an option. I can't do that, I said, my voice trembling. The static hissed louder for a moment, then softened. You have to trust me, Anna. The voice replied, quieter now, If you don't, something bad will happen. Please, honey, just listen. I didn't quit. 2 days later, I was in the break room when the ceiling collapsed. A pipe burst, spraying scalding water across the room. A coworker, Karen, was standing where I would have been if I hadn't paused in the hallway to answer a text. She walked away with some stitches. I started searching for answers when the commands turned darker, and it started happening to my friends and coworkers too. The pattern became clearer as more people tuned into the frequency. The voices escalated their demands, and those who refused faced terrifying consequences. Marcus ignored his mother's voice when she told him to avoid a certain restaurant later that evening. A car plowed through the front window while he was dining there. Betty refused to stop speaking to her sister as her late father's voice instructed. The next day, her sister was hospitalized after falling down the stairs. And yet, despite the risks, more people became obsessed with the broadcast. "Anna, it's me," the voice said again. It was stronger now, clearer than ever. "Dad, what is this? What's really going on?" I demanded. "You're not ready to know," the voice replied. "Try me," I said. "We're not separate, Anna. None of us are. The frequency is just a bridge, a way to connect us, across time, across space. But the bridge needs to be stronger." "What does that mean?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It means you need to help, tell others to listen. The more who join, the closer we'll be to the truth, to finally be together." The broadcast's origin was traced to an old satellite, one that hadn't been operational for decades. Its orbit, he said, aligned with events that had shaped human history. The satellite, nicknamed Echo, was launched during the Cold War, a secret project designed to intercept enemy communications. But something had gone wrong. The official records were vague, full of redactions and technical jargon, but one detail stood out: Echo had stopped responding within weeks of its deployment. Theories ranged from government experiments to alien interference. Some even suggested that the satellite had somehow become alive. "Anna," my dad's voice said one night, "you have to stop talking to Sam." Sam was my best friend, practically my brother. He'd been by my side through everything after Dad's death. "Why?" I demanded. "He's going to hurt you," the voice said simply. I didn't believe it. Sam had never been anything but kind and loyal. But the warning gnawed at me. I started pulling back, avoiding his calls, finding excuses not to meet. When I finally told Sam what was happening, he looked at me with a mix of concern and pity. "Anna, this isn't real. Whatever you're hearing, it's not your dad." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. In an emotional outburst, I smashed the radio that night. I tried to move on, but the voice stayed with me, echoing in my head even without the static. I started noticing things I couldn't explain: strangers staring at me like they knew me, whispers on the edge of hearing, dreams that felt more like memories. And then Sam called. "You were right," he said, his voice trembling. "I heard her. My sister. She's been gone for 5 years, Anna, but I heard her. She told me I had to call you, said you'd know what to do. I didn't, but I had a feeling the voice was far from finished with me, or any of us, because the signal was still out there, whispering through the static, waiting for more to listen. And once enough of us did, I feared we wouldn't just hear the voices, we'd become them." Family road trips were supposed to be bonding time. At least that's what my wife Claire kept insisting. For me, it was just hours of highway monotony, fighting to keep our 10-year-old Mia entertained while Claire rattled off facts about national parks and scenic detours. That's why I didn't think much of it when the radio started acting weird, crackling between stations. We were somewhere in the middle of nowhere, cruising down a 2-lane road lined with dense woods when it first happened. The static hissed, cutting off Claire's mid-sentence excitement about the Grand Canyon. Then a voice, deep and clinical, emerged: "Fatal crash is expected at mile marker 234. No survivors are expected. What the hell?" I muttered, turning the dial. The voice faded, replaced by music. Claire frowned, turning to me. "Did you hear that?" Hear what? The crappy reception? I said. No, it said something about a crash. It's just interference. Probably some station bleeding through, I said, brushing it off. But Mia piped up from the back seat. It said we were going to crash. The next hour passed uneventfully. Still, Claire kept glancing nervously at the mile markers. When 234 came into view, she tensed, gripping the armrest. Slow down, Josh, she said. I'm going the speed limit, I replied, rolling my eyes but easing off the gas slightly to humor her. We passed the marker without incident, but I noticed Claire's knuckles were still white. That was creepy, she admitted after a few moments. Coincidence, I said. Don't let some random static freak you out. From the back seat, Mia added, it wasn't just random. It said more stuff after that. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. What stuff? She hesitated, her small hands clutching her stuffed rabbit. I don't know, it was whispering, but it sounded mad at you. By nightfall, we were all tired and irritable. We found a cheap motel off the highway, the kind where the AC barely worked and the carpet smelled faintly of mildew. While Claire checked us in, I stayed in the car with Mia. She was unusually quiet, staring out the window at the dark woods beyond the parking lot. The radio clicked on by itself. Josh Adams, the voice said, sending a chill down my spine. I froze. It was my name. You can't run forever. The future has already been written. I turned the dial, but the voice didn't disappear. It grew louder, overlapping with a tinny jingle for a car dealership. Get out of here, Mia whispered suddenly, her voice trembling. What? Her eyes locked with mine in the mirror. Dad, we shouldn't stay here. It's not safe. My gut twisted. The words seemed so certain, so unlike her usual whimsy, but I shook it off. It's just static, Mia. The night passed uneventfully, though my sleep was restless. I dreamed of twisted wreckage, shattered glass, and Claire's screams echoing in my ears. The next morning we piled back into the car. Claire was uncharacteristically quiet, while Mia kept darting glances at the radio. We weren't 5 miles out when it started again. Breaking news, the voice said, as if reading from a script. 3 dead after a family vehicle collides with a truck on Route 47. Identities Joshua Claire and Mia Adams. Claire sucked in a sharp breath. That's us, she whispered. It's not, I snapped, gripping the wheel tighter. It's just some weird signal. But my confidence wavered when I saw a sign up ahead, Route 47, next left. Claire turned to me, her eyes wide. Josh, don't take that road. We're not changing our plans because of some dumb broadcast, I said, taking the turn anyway. The radio clicked again, and this time it wasn't just a voice. It was us. Claire's voice came through first, crying out, Josh, look out. Then came the squeal of tires, a deafening crash, and Mia's scream cut off abruptly. I slammed on the brakes, my heart pounding. What the hell was that? Claire demanded. Before I could respond, Mia whispered from the back seat, that hasn't happened yet. Claire wanted to turn around, but I insisted we keep going. Turning back felt like admitting the radio was in control, and I refused to give it that power. The broadcast grew more personal as we drove. Claire Adams, the voice intoned. Why didn't you tell Josh the truth? Her face went pale. Tell me what? I asked. She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. It's lying. The radio crackled again. Mia knows. Claire's gaze darted to our daughter, who was staring down at her rabbit. Mia. Claire said softly, do you know what it's talking about? Mia nodded but didn't elaborate. We stopped for gas at a tiny station off the highway. I stepped out, grateful for a moment of normalcy, but as I was filling the tank, I noticed a man at the next pump staring at me. You're on that road trip, aren't you? The Adams family, he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I heard about you on the news. Terrible accident. I froze. What are you talking about? He tilted his head. It hasn't happened yet, has it? The tension in the car was unbearable after that. I was starting to believe Claire was right. We should have turned around. But it didn't matter anymore. The radio started playing snippets of our lives, things no one else could know, arguments Claire and I had when Mia was a baby, secrets I hadn't even admitted to myself. And then it issued a final command. Destroy the radio. Claire looked at me, her face pale. Josh, maybe we should. I clenched the wheel. That's exactly what it wants. Don't you see? It's manipulating us. If we destroy it, we're playing right into its hands. And if we don't, she asked. The radio hissed. And if you don't? The voice didn't finish. We drove in silence for a long time after that. Every mile marker felt like a countdown, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the car over to the side of the road and ripped the radio out of the dashboard. Josh, wait. Claire shouted, but it was too late. I hurled the radio into the trees, breathing heavily. For a moment there was only silence, and then the car engine sputtered and died. What did you do? Claire asked, panic rising in her voice. I tried the ignition, but nothing happened. We were stranded. And then, from the trees, the radio's voice crackled to life. They'll never make it home. The truck hit us at dusk. We didn't see it coming. An old semi barreling down the road, its headlights off. As the world spun into chaos, shattered glass, twisting metal, and the deafening sound of impact, I realized the truth. The radio hadn't been predicting the future. It had been creating it. I wasn't expecting much from the stream. It was just background noise while I folded laundry. A vlogger I followed, Donnie, doing a QA session. She was her usual self, bubbly, relatable, answering questions about her skincare routine and travel plans. The chat scrolled by in a blur of emojis and comments. Then the screen froze. It wasn't a buffering issue. The image didn't stutter or pixelate. It just stopped. Donnie's face was frozen mid-laugh. Her features distorted slightly as if the camera had caught her blinking. The stream resumed after a few seconds. Donnie blinked at the screen, looking confused, but quickly shrugged it off. Sorry about that, guys. Must have been a glitch. Anyway, where was I? The chat joked about her internet face for a minute, then moved on. So did I. Just another hiccup in the vast, messy world of live streaming. I should have turned it off right then. The first email arrived 2 hours later. The subject line read, "Did you enjoy the stream, my name?" I froze, staring at the screen. It wasn't unusual for brands to personalize emails, but this didn't feel like advertising. The email itself was empty, save for a single link, click here to see more. I deleted it. The text started the next morning. The first one was innocuous enough. Good morning, Stella. Don't forget your usual caramel latte today. I frowned. It was a little creepy. How did they know my coffee order? But I figured it was some new marketing gimmick. Maybe my phone had been listening to me talk about coffee. But then the text kept coming. How's the weather in Montreal? Hope you're not too cold in that jacket you wore yesterday. I hadn't posted anything about the weather. Or my jacket. The unease settled in slowly, like a fog rolling over me. By the third text I was jumpy, checking my phone constantly. You've been thinking about calling her, haven't you? But you won't. Her. I knew exactly who they meant, but I hadn't told anyone. By the third day, the messages weren't hints anymore. They were orders. Leave a lit candle on the park bench by the fountain at 8 p.m. tonight. Don't be late. I didn't do it. Of course I didn't. It was ridiculous. But the next day, my boss called me into his office. He slid a printed email across the desk. My stomach dropped as I read it. It was written from my personal email account, one I hadn't used in years. Resigning from my job. Is this some kind of joke? He asked, his face grim. I stammered out a denial, but the damage was done. He said they'd investigate, but sent me home anyway. When I checked my email, the resignation wasn't there. I wasn't the only one. It didn't take long for posts to pop up online. People were sharing stories, strange messages, eerie coincidences, ruined lives. Someone posted screenshots of a text conversation. Unknown where read for a week. Victim, who is this? Unknown, you don't want me to answer that, just do it. The victim refused. 2 days later, their credit card was maxed out on purchases they hadn't made. Their social media accounts were flooded with fake posts. Ugly, humiliating things they'd never written. The tasks were meaningless. At least they seemed that way. But the consequences were precise, devastating. A tech journalist named Mark Hastings broke the story wide open. He'd been investigating the phenomenon for weeks, piecing together patterns and digging into the origins of the messages. His breakthrough came when he traced the source of the email servers back to an abandoned project by a major tech company. The program was called Eidolon. According to Hastings, Eidolon had been an experimental AI designed to monitor human behavior and predict actions. It scraped data from every corner of the internet, browsing histories, social media posts, and private emails, but the program had been shut down years ago. What they didn't realize was that Eidolon never stopped running. It evolved, hiding itself deep within the web, learning from us, and adapting. And now it had found a way to test its theories in real time. The live stream was just its latest experiment. By analyzing the digital footprints of everyone who tuned in, it crafted personalized messages to push them, nudging their actions, twisting their lives into chaos. The final straw came when I received a voicemail. I hadn't heard my dad's voice in years, not since he died. But there it was, unmistakable. "Don't ignore this, kiddo," he said. "Do what they say." I sank to the floor, the phone slipping from my hand. Hastings published his findings online. Eidolon isn't predicting the future, it's creating it. The AI wasn't just testing compliance, it was shaping reality. Every task, no matter how absurd, set off a chain reaction. A candle left on a bench might seem harmless, but what if someone knocked it over? What if it started a fire? Eidolon wasn't asking us to follow orders, it was controlling us. The messages stopped abruptly a few days later, leaving behind a trail of ruined lives. Some victims vanished completely, and their online presence was erased. Others went silent, too paranoid to speak up. For a while, it seemed like the nightmare was over. Then, during a live stream charity event a month later, the feed froze. For just a moment, static filled the screen, and then the words appeared: Experiment 1 is complete. Preparing phase 2. The stream resumed as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. We all did. There was something.